accessible, i.e. self-declared by managers of hotels, but not really authenticated by anybody else. And as we learned to our cost at times, some of it was totally inaccessible. They'd overlook there were 3 steps walking into the property, even if it did have an accessible bedroom. And their version of accessible, and perhaps ours here, was something very different. So it was a lot of, that's not going to work. So what we ended up doing was loosely grading properties. And forgive me, because this is clumsy, because I appreciate everybody's very, very different, but you might say that might be able to work for an open-minded paraplegic, tetraplegic, got no chance, so on and so forth, and to a degree measuring. But what we really set about doing, rather than trying to grade things, because even as we all know, you put 12 paras next to each other and actually ask them, can you do this? And some will say, yeah, no bother at all. And I'll say, no chance. So it's mindset. There's a whole multitude of different things that will affect your decision as to whether that is a suitable holiday or not. So we took a mass of photographs, and that was really all part of the process. You can imagine coming back through customers after one of these little visits was entertaining, as people were looking at the amount of photographs we've amassed of toilets and showers, and wonder what the hell we were all about. But really, we would then recruit ladies and gents from the travel industry, but explain to them this is a different process. This is going to be far more about the accessibility of the venue as such, less so about the sea view, the air conditioning. They're still important, but these people will want to know in finite detail, is it accessible and in what way, and can you demonstrate that by means of photographs? That's how it started, and we were very successful. We were running for the best part of 20 years. Our portfolio was predominantly Europe, bucket and spade destinations. Tenerife was our best seller, but equally we did Florida, Egypt. We ran a program there, and we even did some tours down to Australia and New Zealand. But you can imagine the length of flight was prohibitive almost in itself. All good. And then you're going to hear all the hard luck stories that you're all more than familiar with, which probably started off, I can't even remember which order it was now, but we've had volcanoes, we've had terrorists, we've had various viruses prior to this one. And it was 2010 with the big recession, and it became very, very evident. To do the job properly, and by means of that, what I'm really saying is you've got to keep on top of these things. You had to visit these places regularly, because often they're making changes. I saw an article even a couple of weeks ago from Carrie Ann, you probably all know, is a travel blogger, and she just commented on one of the Holiday Inns was now taking, one of the central London Holiday Inns was taking out its roll-in shower. So we had properties that we had validated and actually determined that they were okay, they were good, and then change of management, change of ownership, and things get reversed again. So you constantly need to keep on top of it, and it's costly. And facilitating holidays for people, when the bucket and spade mainstream audience, as was then the Thomas Cooks, the TUIs as they're called now, and various others, it's all about high volume, bums on seats. Everybody's going to stay in the same room, get on a coach. They make their money by moving hundreds of thousands, millions of passengers. We were facilitating essentially bespoke holidays, but we couldn't afford to sell them at 6-star prices because nobody's got that kind of, well, our audience didn't have that kind of money. So regrettably, I think the recession was the turning point for us, but we did carry on for a number of years thereafter. But as we got into sort of 2018, 2019, it was just not sustainable, unfortunately. Small tour operators are treated really no differently to major large ones. So a lot of the running costs, irrespective of size, are just ridiculous and disproportionate, and your insurances and the various covers, you just can't cope unless you put your prices through the roof, and then you guys can't afford it. So it's just not going to be done. But during that time, I did probably what any other responsible owner of a business would do, and start to look at customer complaints and what was the root cause, why were where do we get wrong, what people are unhappy about. And the common denominator time and time again were airports and airlines. So that gave me reason to want to understand better where was their process failing, because I was very confident I'd captured all the relevant information, because that's what my ladies and gents were taught to do. And when I'm getting into the personal care stories and accounts from you guys saying, well, you know, I'm going to need a rolling shower, and it can't have one that's got a tile around it. So you can appreciate a lot of the showers have got like a water retaining small tile or ridge just around the shower. And some of the paraplegics say, yeah, that's all right, I can cope with that. Pivot wheels up will be fine. Maybe one of the tetras would turn around and say, no, can't do that. So we were having to obviously capture enormous amounts of very, very personal, critical details about an individual's needs and requirements, which we naturally, where appropriate, relayed to the airport and the airline. But still, it wasn't working. And I'm sure many of you have probably had that experience. I don't want to put Stephen off, who's contemplating going to America. I still want you to go, but there is a degree of caution that's needed when making those decisions about airline, destination, and so forth. So I then got more involved with the airports themselves. Business still running, but luckily I've got had some very capable assistants who were able to sort of manage the day-to-day care. But I was asked, I live in the West Country, I should have said, guys, I'm over in Gloucestershire. So I was sort of close to Bristol and Birmingham initially, and they invited me in because there was many of you probably are aware of this, there was a law change in about 2006, 2007, where European law determined that we should now give control of passenger welfare and well-being, including passage through the airport and getting on the aircraft, to the airport itself, rather than what was formerly with the airline. Now, I think a lot of that came off the back, if I'm really honest with you, of Ryanair being one of the key offenders, not looking after passengers particularly well, getting on and off plane. So they try to sort of level the playing field and say, right, we'll make it an airport responsibility. So it's fair, level, equal, everybody gets the same service. All right, concept. There's a whole bunch of other reasons which I'll discuss with you later as to why that doesn't quite work in practice, unfortunately. Personally, I'd have far preferred that we were given the choice as consumers to go with the airline that looked after us the best from start to finish, including getting me on and off. So I'd have probably gravitated towards Virgin Atlantic, who've got a great reputation. I wouldn't have touched Ryanair with a barge pole, but that was the way it was chosen to be done, and thus that's how we proceeded. But as you can appreciate, airports now being given, Breeder, I'm sorry, I'm ranting on here, I'm not really answering your questions, but I'm on a roll really, so I'll kind of carry on as to the whole history and how it evolved. But essentially what happened is airports had never been entrusted with this level of responsibility. And so they thought, right, what are we going to do? So they started bringing in their facilities management companies like OCS, OmniServe, who are the guys that have probably assisted them with other airport-related tasks in the past, be it cleaning aircraft, de-icing aircraft. So you can appreciate they go from fairly non-customer facing roles to suddenly looking after potentially their most precious passengers at an airport. Well, guess what? With the greatest of respect for any of those that travelled back in 2007, 2008, they weren't the greatest. Training poor, empathy virtually non-existent. You've got most of their workforce earning either minimum wage or a shade above it. Pardon the expression, but blind leading the blind. I mean, they just really were not, in a lot of instances, fit for purpose. Smaller airports were better than the larger ones. I think there was generally a better sort of more caring. I found out that just generally with some of the big airports, and I worked at Heathrow for a while, was a classic example. The staff change was every 2-3 months. You know, you've just got somebody trained, you've just bedded them in. Before you know it, they're out the door, they've gone into something else. So it was very, very difficult to keep on top of that. So I initially was sort of supporting OCS and then OmniServe being these facility management companies that were entrusted with this task, helping them with training, looking at processes, procedures, and so forth. But then started to work more closely with the Civil Aviation Authority itself, saying, well, you are the enforcer. Are you happy as a government body with the standards within your airports? Which again, for those that have travelled, you probably would agree, it weren't great. So I said, I think you need to look at kind of the root cause. Where is it going wrong? If they're not paying the staff enough, which evidently I think is part of your problem, Why aren't they? Where's the money coming from? And this whole system was in some respects a little bit back to front, because what you were doing is you were asking the airport to manage, but they were reclaiming the money from the airlines. But of course, all the airlines will just tell us, well, I don't want to pay that much. But unless you're kind of told by a government body, you've got no choice, you need to pay that much in order for the system to work effectively, it starts to sort of fall down a bit. So I had a degree of sympathy for some of these companies like the Omniserves and OCSs, because they actually haven't got enough money to start with to fund this in the way it should be done. So in a nutshell, the travel company regrettably had to fold at the back end of 2019, and then I essentially formed what we call now Accessible Travel Consultancy Services. So it was a spin-off from the original travel company, where I now work for a number of the UK airports, or at least was prior to COVID, but we'll talk about that later. And that evolved with the support from the CAA in terms of formalizing that arrangement and actually encouraging the airports themselves to form proper consultative committees that then did involve members from a variety of charities, disability organisations, as well as disabled travellers themselves. So you were getting the input directly from the people that use the service, meeting with airport management teams to sort of say, guys, this isn't working, and these are the reasons being. So I worked with a number of representatives from SIA, Gary up in Manchester, Liverpool area. I've got Kevin over in, I know you've had a bit of a realignment of your people recently, but Kevin was working with me in Stansted,
he's down
Luton area, and so, and again, various ones that sort of dotted around the country. So they have in turn hopefully fed back to people in their area about how the service works, how they should pre-notify, what the procedures are, etc., in terms of trying to help improve the service. So, Brita, I've gone off cue a bit really, because I haven't really sort of followed your pattern, but I suppose. Sorry. So really, where at the moment, I had initially my involvement with Heathrow, but now I'm just looking at my list now just to refresh my memory. I have these various committees being hosted at Stansted, Luton, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, and Edinburgh. And there are, I mean, that's the bulk of the main ones. Gatwick is done by another lady, Anne Bates, who might be familiar to you. She's chair user and is well renowned and has done a very good job down there. The committees themselves, I'm doing it again. I'm sorry, I'm coming back to you. I know what your questions are, which is probably not fair to admit that. So do you mind if I just carry on? Because you could ask me, but I kind of know what you're going to ask me, so I'm just doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Going off script a bit. But I really said, when the Civil Aviation Authority said, yeah, we should form these committees, I said, that's great. I think it's a good idea, but I don't want just tokenism. What's the purpose behind these? What are we gathering for? Are we just going to tick a box, or are we actually genuinely endeavouring to make a difference? And what are you expecting from us? Now, the answer to that question initially was they were very much into sort of measuring performance and standards of the airports themselves. And I think this is quite interesting because it was very time orientated. So there are a set of directives laid down by the as was Brussels, when I do still believe, I should point out, irrespective of Brexit, I think the British aviation industry will still strictly adhere to the guidelines as were under the EU regs, but of course we now don't necessarily have to comply with them as they were originally laid out. But those were a series of time metrics. When Andy arrives at an airport, he must be greeted by a certain time period. He must then be taken to the aircraft, blah, blah, blah. It was very sort of metrics centered. And all right, that was good in some respects. But when I met with a lot of your colleagues around the country, as I would expect, many of them were actually saying, yeah, but let's not forget the whole sort of dignity and respect bit. And I still would like to have a coffee like everybody else. And I would still like to go to the duty free. because this was a very robotic system. Meet Andy at desk, check him in, whiz him straight through to the plane, because essentially you're being time measured. Well, what kind of feedback am I going to give in my sort of customer service accreditation afterwards? I'm sort of saying, well, all right, he got me there in a timely manner, but I didn't really have an airport experience. It was quite rushed, didn't speak to me, and I didn't get my bottle of whiskey, and I didn't get a chance to use the loo, or believe I would have insisted. But my point being, it wasn't necessarily in his or her mindset at that initial point. So I said to CAA, I said, you're very focused on timing and measuring standards, which a lot of you civil servants like to do, but it's not really necessarily improving the quality of the service. Then we need to look at things like the infrastructure. Does it suit us? Well, as chair users, that's fairly straightforward for us. They know what door widths they should be adhering to, the ramps should be minimalized, etc. So that's not too bad. But obviously hidden disabilities has been big on the agenda in the past couple of years. And there were a number of people with autism or with dementia. They were getting lost, confused, upset, noise, crowds, lighting, walking through duty free with all the smells of the perfumes, a multitude of different sensory overloads. I said, so for them, it's not about getting from A to B as quickly as possible. They'd actually like to try and avoid the duty free if we can. They don't need to go through it. They just want a quieter experience. So this opened up a whole new debate about, well, actually, we should all be involved with infrastructure. You've obviously got in many airports very ancient infrastructure, which in some respects looks like it's held together by sellotape. But more importantly, we can make some token changes there in the interim. But with future development, we bring in all these fancy new terminals. I think we should look at the floor tiles, the colors. I found a number of guys with dementia were not walking on grey floor tiles because they had assumed that that was like a manhole and they were going to actually fall into whoa. People were getting lost in toilets. They didn't know where the exit was because nobody had actually bothered to put the simple exit sign on the back of the door. They knew how they got in. They didn't remember how they got out. It's all these silly little nitty gritty things that when you started talking to people with the condition itself and saying, guys, you just need to actually get much better feedback before you start building these all singing or dancing fancy glass palaces and so forth, because they don't work for all of us in the way that you've done it. So that was a major step forward, and that was a major plus in terms of their redesign. Obviously, simple things which we all benefit from, websites, their public communication. Was it accessible? Was it in different formats? You know, was it easy to understand? A lot of technical language still used. We are affectionately known as PRMs when we travel through an airport. What does that mean in English? A passenger with reduced mobility. Okay, well, in our regard, that actually is appropriate. Somebody with autism, they're still called a PRM. Somebody with dementia, still called a PRM. Visually impaired, hearing impaired. So you think the language is actually wholly inappropriate, given that it should be completely pan-disability. So I said that needs to be regarded. Well, that was more complicated because that's Europe again. So we have some issues to address there going forward. But the key one that's fairly straightforward, obviously we're going to be looking at things like infrastructure and equipment as more of a capital expenditure, and those are things that they need to get right next time they make the changes. But the basic that was glaring us in the face, training. You know, what level of training is being given to these persons on minimum wage, where actually if they're in a classroom, they're not earning money, so they cost the company money. So actually the training that they're afforded, in the true sense of the word, is not enough. And again, it hasn't had our input to it. If I'm honest, it was very sterile. So that is an area, again, sorry, Peter, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but I know you were going to ask me about, you know, what's the function of these and the benefit of. I have seen in that regard a lot of improvements, different input, different people. The biggest problem the aviation industry has had, regrettably, with all that's going on in the world right now, will have even more, is turnover of staff. You just get into a pattern, you just get into a system, good, reliable people, and they move on. If it's the airport management team, they only ever seem to spend about 2 years, sometimes more, running the PRM department. and then they moved on to luggage, then they moved on to operations or whatever. So then you go through the motions again with the next person. A lot of the staff, it's high turnover, as I say, so it's very, very repetitive. Then the process itself is quite political within the airport, because you think you're actually just talking about an airport and an airline, but you've got the one facility management company that I've mentioned, or the two or three, but there you'll have ground agents. Those are the people that are responsible then for putting our equipment, be it hoist, sticks if appropriate, chair, into the hold. Communication with them, training for them. They're about to take my £25,000 wheelchair off me. Do they actually know how to put it into mobile modes, take off the race, all these? So you look at some of them, I very much doubt it. I mean, I've seen mine with if you like, in gear being pushed along the tarmac, you know, because they haven't been, oh, I don't know how to take those off, and they're literally dragging it along. Oh my God. So you can appreciate it's very, very complicated, constant turnover of different staff, different suppliers, and then the communication between them. So that's the background as to kind of where I have been, what I'm currently doing, and where we're trying to influence things going forward. Really, what would you like to? You wanted to say, what are the most common issues? I think was one of your questions for me, wasn't it, in terms of complaints? And it's probably one that's shared by many of the people here. I think wheelchair damage historically has always been a big bugbear, especially if you've got expensive power chairs. You lose sight of it once you're actually on the aircraft. Actually, before I rant on any further, has everybody I'm talking to here today, have you all flown before?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have. So you're familiar with the process as a rule, going through the airport, being assisted, and then again, I'm assuming in most cases you're probably being manually lifted from what they call an aisle chair onto your airline seat. So it's almost where you're at the aircraft door, ideally, and not before, you're parted from your chair, taken away by somebody else. You don't actually know where it's going. You hope, pray that it's going into the hold. You are then taken on one of their little, as they call it, aisle chairs, so that it will literally fit up the aisle of the aircraft, and then transferred manually from that little chair onto your airline seat. Now, it wasn't that many years ago. In many airports, I'm afraid to say it's still happening. You're being physically lifted, close up body, you know, hand under arms, round chest, a big manual lift. Horrendous, not good for me. I don't imagine it's good for anybody. But there was the introduction then of what they called a Pro Move Sling, which looks very much like the sling you'd use on a hoist. The only difference being where you wouldn't have the loops that would go on the hooks of the actual hoist itself. You got big, chunky hand grips, sort of rubber hand grips. So it's not perfect. It's not anywhere near as smooth as your normal hoist you would use, but it's certainly more dignified and more comfortable to be lifted with 2, 3, 4 people lifting this sling up into the air, so that you're kind of cocooned in it to a degree and protecting your back a little bit, and then placed onto your airline seat. Since then, they've introduced again a oh God, I've got to remember its name now. It is called Eagle Hoist. Thank you so much indeed. Good for you. And again, it doesn't work in all situations. It doesn't work on all aircraft. It doesn't work on all seats. But for those that can benefit from it, again, a far more dignified, more comfortable transfer. So I feel a lot of this, it is technology, it is advancement, but a lot of this has come off the back of people over the years complaining about the way in which things were done, not done well, and could be done better. And we've had suppliers come to some of these forums and sit down and say, well, what do you need? In a perfect world, we'd love an overhead tracking system that ran along the roof of the aircraft. That's never going to happen. But at least with these creations, they've made that process better. So I think that's been a serious benefit. I see that training principle, the way in which it's delivered, is far better. But I still personally would like to see a much longer training course. Depending on the airport, these can be as little as 3 days, and this will be policies, procedures, health and safety, disability inclusion training, and they've got an awful lot to learn, as well as the layout, the geography of the airport, and how the whole system works. They're brand new. Some of them never flown before, and they're getting immersed with this absolute overload of knowledge for 2-3 days, and then they're out supposedly being shadowed, I guess, by some of their colleagues. But in reality, if there aren't enough staff, that shadowing process is clearly not as efficient as it should be. So suddenly that could be the person that's helping you the next day. You can see already, I'm not happy. It's a system that's in existence. It has got better. Could it get better? Clearly it could. But the root cause of this is going to have to come down to legislation and money, like most things in life. The Civil Aviation Authority is going to have to get tougher with airports and airlines, raising the standards. We all talk about what we would like to see, but is it enforceable? No. The only area that they're named and shamed on is their punctuality. If you're left on an aircraft after 45 minutes, which is a disgrace, then it will get flagged up and they will bring the airport to task. But will they actually fine them? Will they get any penalty? Nah. So you could say they get a bit of a rap on the knuckles. I am being very cynical, but the reality is if things are going to change, you've got to take it very, very seriously. Probably what happens is the airport will charge its service provider, i.e. this OCS Omniserve, they'll charge them a penalty for failing, but that money's not going back into the fund to improve the whole system. So it's an underfunded system that's kind of held together by sellotape. Sorry guys, I shouldn't be telling all this, which it works and it has got better. But to answer one of your questions, Billy, could it be better? Again, of course it could. And that's politics. It's going to take a lot more doing really in that regard. What else did you want to ask me? You wanted to ask me about, I suppose, one of the issues which this is maybe a personal thing, but I've always felt a degree of sympathy as well for those that may have had problems when they've flown and it's been time related. The biggest problem we've had since day one is this whole thing with pre-notification. For those of you that have flown, do you always tell the airline or the airport that you're coming first?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I pick up on a few things that you're saying?
Sure.
I'm a C56 incomplete, T12 C7 complete, and I've travelled the world. I was Paralympic athlete, and I've travelled the world, and I've done long haul on my own.
Wow.
Well, why not? Right?
No, very, very good. But there's a lot of people I wish were like you. Yeah.
That's because I have the confidence, and I've been fortunate enough to know what I can, what I need, what I can do. The days of your wheelchair, I totally agree with you that wheelchairs are badly damaged or can be. I'm also very fortunate and very privileged that I'm petite, and I don't know if many people know that you can actually put transit wheels on your wheelchair. If you've got a narrow enough wheelchair that will go up the aisle of a plane, you can put transit wheels on your wheelchair. So when you take the wheels off, and you can actually use your wheelchair as the aisle chair, which is what I do. And when I'm on long haul, I insist that my wheelchair, because it folds down and it will go into the wardrobe. So I have my wheelchair on board, and I tell them that if I don't have my wheelchair on board, I'm actually not able to go to the toilet myself, and I will need their assistance. And of course, the forms that we have to, the silly forms that we have to fill in, talks about you being able, the airlines say they don't want, they're not able to help you. What they say on the forms and what is in reality, because often I'm having to push these people away because they want to help me with everything. But I think we have to know what it is we want. And so, I cannot remember when I sat in that dreadful, them herding you all together, because I used, I say to them, right, what time, can I get to the gate? What time do I need to be at the gate? And I'll meet you there. and then I go off and have a coffee, you know, spend lots of money that I don't have in duty free and stuff like that. And actually the airlines will do that. And the other thing that's most important with your wheelchair is that you have to insist. One, you insist from the moment you go into the airport, you are not going to be parted from your wheelchair at all. And you can do that with electric wheelchairs, you can do that with manual wheelchairs. And then what you do is you take the chair right to the door of the plane, and you insist that it goes, because there are two holes, and there's a hole, so you insist that the wheelchair comes to you at the door of the plane when you reach your destination. And that's really important, because otherwise your wheelchair will go into the airport, and then you're stuffed with their dreadful wheelchairs. So it's about, one of the things is it's about knowing what you as an individual want. And I mean, I've got personal views on that the assistance system is being abused, and it's being abused by people who, you know, say, oh, I need assistance. They get this, it's a walking, you know, elderly walking people that they take the assistance, which is fine. But when you get to your destination and they don't want to wait 15 minutes, they're gone.
They're the first off.
And we actually have to find a way that is stopped, because it actually causes a problem for people like us that really need the assistance on the flight, you know, to get onto the flight. I did have a question for you, and Brexit is one of them and COVID is the other, in terms of one of the greatest things that happened, and I can tell you from travelling for many, many years, is the rules about, as a disabled passenger, which came from the EU. And I've got a feeling that the government wants to drop all of that. So in terms of our rights as passengers after Brexit, and the other one is in terms of COVID. Now, I would disagree with you. If I have to be lifted, I would prefer to be lifted, somebody at the back on my arms and somebody in my legs. A, I can guide them, and B, that I know I'm solid because I'm very floppy. But I'd like to know, in terms of COVID, how any of this, and will this be a door opening to the airline industry trying to stop disabled passengers from travelling?
During COVID or post-COVID?
Well, post-COVID. I mean, we have the COVID Act, and I suspect that there'll be some, I haven't read it all, but somewhere in it there will be some nasty little thing about, you know, disabled travelling passengers at some point. And so post-COVID, and well, COVID really, because we may not have as huge, you know, infection rates, but there will still be well, MARS is still there, MERS is still there. It's not as prevalent, but so COVID is never going away. It will always be somewhere, maybe in very small numbers. And that's one of the questions that I'd like to know the answer to, is how are we going to be able to travel on an airline, on an aeroplane with COVID around?
Well, I mean, that's a brilliant question. I mean, the reality is, do I see anything being forced upon us or discouraged because of COVID? Far from it, no. I mean, the one thing I would say, our Civil Aviation Authority, having spoken to a few counterparts in Europe, in terms of the way that they have enforced the EU law since it came out in 2006, is one of the best in Europe. So I actually do think that the way, you believe it or not, Google, you don't even want to hear about what some of our friends in France and Spain are like. They've got better, but in terms of actually monitoring, and you could argue, are they monitoring in the ways in which we would like them to monitor? But that's a different subject. In terms of their sort of policing of the system and regularly checking on airport performance and so forth, they have definitely been one of the better ones. They are strong advocates for the continuance of our rights and our ability to travel. I see nothing to go out. And a question I asked leading up to the Brexit decision was, do you think it might sort of drop off by the wayside, and everybody, airlines included, said, no, we're very proud of what we've achieved. That will continue. So I don't see a lessening or a discouragement of disabled passengers, because essentially they don't have to. Now, at the moment, you can appreciate PRM numbers across all airports are radically reduced, because that's been our decision as a collective not to wish to travel. We don't have the confidence. We are worried about our well-being go forward. And I mean, I won't get on the flight at the moment, but that's probably partly out of ignorance. I'm still haven't had a straight answer, for example, as to how people like EasyJet and Ryanair especially have been advertising they've got almost COVID-friendly aircon units. Now, that's probably ignorance on my part, because I don't understand sufficiently about the transference of the virus. You know, to me, if there's somebody sitting in the front row and they're coughing and sputtering, and it goes direct up into the aircon, will that get transferred to me or not? I don't know. But for that very reason, I'm not comfortable to travel, mask or otherwise. But I don't see us being encouraged not to travel because of that, provided we take the same precautions as every other passenger would do. Do you think?
Andy?
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry, I didn't know if you'd finished or not. I just wanted to ask you a question. Your consultancy, does it start at the entrance to the airports and then onto the airlines, or do you actually look at the wider picture and look at things like airport parking and things like that?
Literally, for essentially how you get to the airport, as much as, I mean, I like to try and work with other transport providers that are obviously feeding into the airport, so where they've got a rail link. But I mean, especially car parks. Luton's a great example of this. You know, Luton has got a great report from the Civil Aviation Authority, and I said, look where the drop-off point is. I mean, I know they're restructuring things now, but it's miles away. So no, it's important for me as to how people get there and facilitate the travel into the terminal.
No, it's funny. I mean, I a couple of years ago, I travel quite regularly, and I became aware of a massive problem with Gatwick, and the fact that they sort of have somewhere in the regions of 0.3% of their parking facilities are actually disabled, which is well under what the government recommendations are. Oh yeah, I've got all the figures and facts and had meetings with the lot. I mean, if you take, for example, back in 2017, they had somewhere in the regions of 40,000 car parking spaces, and actually only had 158 of them being disabled. Okay, you talk about Luton. Well, I wrote to Luton and asked them for information about their airport and how many of their spaces were accessible, and they wrote back to me saying they were in because they were a private company, they didn't need to tell me. So yeah, I had that from Luton, from Birmingham, I think, had the same response. Liverpool was the same. Heathrow, I was actually told by the car parking manager there that it was in my interest to go back to Gatwick and look at them first and before going to Heathrow. So yeah, but yeah, no, just wondered if you, you know, if when you look at stuff, you actually look into the car parking side of it as well.
No, I mean, very definite. What we've often done, again, pre-COVID, we were encouraging sort of infrastructure evaluations where I would bring in representatives from Alzheimer's Society, Autism UK, SIA, to kind of be, you know, pan-disability represented. And I would actually start in the car park or at the train station or whatever, and almost like everybody just walk the walk and give me your feedback. Did you see where the signs were? Did it work for you? Were you guided appropriately? Is everybody familiar with Helen Dolphin, who?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Helen sits on one of my committees, so you can imagine car parks is her bag. She loves to get involved with that.
Sorry, Andy. Who's Helen
Sorry,
Dolphin?
Helen Dolphin. She's also a consultant, but she's very. What guys help me? I can't remember the name of her company now, but she does a lot with parking to ensure that it is compliant with. I think she calls herself Blue Badge Parking. Actually,
okay.
I'm not, but honestly, she's an advocate. She's quadruple amputee and has been a strong advocate for appropriate parking in all walks of life, in every place, supermarkets and likewise, but she's big on car parks. I know, for example, Birmingham, as you mentioned there, Dustin, that was poor. And I say, guys, you've got them all on the first level of your multi-story, but it's always jam-packed. Where the rest? And it was some sort of ridiculous example about, oh, well, when we built this, it was almost like legislation days or something ludicrous. I said, well, you need to reevaluate it, because at the moment, and you've got probably an adequate amount on the first floor, and they have electric doors as you vacate that level. But all the other levels, which is where invariably we end up parking, they don't have enough, and we don't have adequate doors. So, you know, you've got to get it right one way or the other. So I know it's not been uppermost in an airport's mind, because the guy that normally runs the PRM department is different to the guy that is responsible for infrastructure and, more importantly, car parks. But we're trying to encourage this greater understanding and collaboration. And I keep coming back to it, and it's not a cop-out, but if I had stricter policy from the governing body, i.e. the Civil Aviation Authority, that they were measuring the standards of these airports in a way that probably is more akin to what we would like to see, beyond just, I keep saying, time metrics, I think it would help. And that's one thing we're trying to advocate as well, that if they know that you're looking at their parking situation as well as their performance on getting people on and off planes, it would help with the whole process.
Problem is, the car parks are private property, and there is no regulation that says that they must. It's just a recommendation. So if even though, take for example Gatwick, like I say, of the 40,500 spaces they had in 2017, only 158 of them are disabled. Now, if you start reading through their annual reports, you can see that their whole business is based around how much money can we make. Correct. And every time you use a disabled bay, you're taking away from normal spacing. So you can see where, and they've actually said that they want to have, you know, more normal spacing and everything within their sort of reports. So to me, there is nobody there to enforce them, to make sure that there is enough spaces for people. I mean, I had a meeting with Gatwick around the same time, and they were telling me about, I mean, I was trying to find a paperwork before the meeting, but they were telling me about the amount of people that come through Gatwick every month who are, you know, people of reduced mobilities. And yet I said to them, so you've got somewhere in the regions of 10,000 people coming in the next month, but yet you've got 158 spaces to manage them with. And they just looked at me with this sort of blank look, as if to say, yeah. And, you know, so, I mean, I've tried to speak to Helen before, and she said to me, send her my reports, and I did, and never got anything back from her. So, you know, I kind of gave up on that route as well.
But picking up on the parking, the other one is, you know, if you're going away, you want, unless you've asked somebody to bring your car, come with you, to take your car away, and then to bring it back to collect you. It's about the safety of our cars if you're leaving them at the airport. And, you know, I mean, there's been all sorts of exposés on, you know, when your car goes off to, you know, is it valet parking, where they go and actually what's happening is your car's left in a field somewhere. But, you know, and that's actually really important to us. One, because our cars are so important, but, you know, to the poor people that are on Motability, that would have a massive impact if their car was kind of destroyed when they thought that it was, you know, that it was safe. So parking, you're absolutely right. And I can't remember if it's Heathrow or Gatwick, but one of the things that I went to pick up a friend, I think it was Gatwick, Stansted, and actually the disabled parking, and they were disabled as well, and the disabled parking was actually in the zone, if you wanted to be near the doors, was in the zone that was the most expensive parking costs, because we're no longer exempt from paying these, you know, blue badge holders. So I went to pick this friend up, and we were almost probably about 10 minutes, and it cost me £25 because the disabled parking was in the A zone, which was, you know, the most expensive. So again, you know, we have to have something changed in terms of blue badge holders, and, you know, in terms of where you can park and how close you can park to the entrances of the airport without having to incur astronomical cost.
Totally agree. Yeah. And I mean, the other side of it as well is, say, for example, at Gatwick, the long-term parking spaces, the accessible ones, you know, a lot of people like myself, I will take my blue badge with me because I can use it, like if I'm driving out in America or somewhere like that. And then you're parking in the disabled bay without a blue badge. So you don't know if anybody that's parked in these limited spaces is actually, you know, valid parking, really, because there's no way for them to monitor it, and they don't provide any sort of service where, you know, you show them your blue badge and they will provide you with a temporary pass that you can put in your car in its place.
Some of the regional airports do that. Where are you referring to? Is this Gatwick?
This is Gatwick. Yeah, Gatwick is
I'm
my
not
main.
sure.
Gatwick is my main airport that I use on a regular basis, and yeah, it's kind of, you turn up and you like, especially if it's long term, and you've got to hope that there's a space available. And, you know, if they say to you, oh yeah, if there's no spaces, we'll find you an alternative, and I'm like, well, how can you find me an alternative, because your spaces are so small? I need to open my door fully to be able to get in and out. So, and you know, that's why I need a disabled bay, and you can't monitor them, which they also claim to do. You can't physically monitor them because you don't have to display a disabled badge, because a lot of people take them with them because they need them.
I also have a question with regards to, now everything's becoming automated and it's bag drop off. I don't know if people are aware, but actually, if we travel by air, we can have a medical bag. So we can actually have an extra bag for our medical equipment, which is free of charge. You know, Ryanair and people like that might suggest that it isn't, but it's actually free of charge. And you need to get a letter from your doctor saying that you need to take medical equipment with you, and it can be really loosely written, and you know, you can. But now, and I've had problems where, you know, all you're dealing with, because they've no longer got the bit where you know, check in with people, and all there's no managers around, or it's quite difficult to get hold of managers. That people are, you know, the staff that monitor helping people, you know, check their bag in, are saying, oh no, you've got to pay for that, and actually we don't. And you then having to bring in, you know, trying to get a manager to help these people understand that as a disabled person, if you have a letter from your doctor saying that you need to travel with medical equipment, you're entitled to a medical bag. It's an additional bag, and actually it can be the same weight as your normal bag, at 23, 25 kilo. You know, it's really important that is flagged up, because we're becoming so automated. And the other one is again, I don't know if people are aware, but actually, you know, we've got you know, all this weight stuff. You can get round it. So and I've done it with Ryanair, where I've rung them up and I've had to speak to some medical people. I've said to them, again, medical supplies, you need to have medical stuff that you need to take with you in several bags, because if you don't get one bag, you're stuck. But if you've got them in several bags, so I've actually, you know, rung up Ryanair and said, well, I actually need further weight on my normal bag, because I've got to take medical equipment with me. And they've gone, oh yeah, and I've gone, no, because if I don't get my medical bag for some unknown reason, I'm stuffed. Also, because of my disability and maybe incontinence issues, I actually have to take more clothes than most people because I need it. And what I found was they actually in the end said to me, well, how much weight do you want? And I went, oh, I can manage about 25 kilo with my main bag, and then 25 kilo with my medical bag. So actually you can, you can actually do it in such a way that you get extra weight, which is great coming back, because you can then put all your prezzies and stuff in. But I think it's important people know that they can actually have a medical bag, and you can negotiate with the airlines to increase the weight at no further cost. Increase the weight of your main bag, because you just have to give an argument that your needs are different.
Thank you, Joy. Faisal, sorry, you put your hand up a little while ago. Did you want to say something or ask a question?
Oh, thanks, Breda. It was just that I just wanted to put a bit of a challenge, Andy, because some of the things you're talking about, it almost seems that the investments that have been put out there, albeit not great, and the infrastructure that's been implemented, and the work that you've been doing with some of the airports, is you're talking in the past tense. And actually the reality is, for most people, that it's not in the past tense, because what we find, certainly in UK airports, is, and certainly as an organisation ourselves, we get regular stories and horror stories of extreme kinds. And they're far outweighed by the good experience. And we all know that if we go to a great restaurant, we'll probably tell 2 people. If we have a really bad experience, we'll tell about 10 people, don't go to that restaurant. Yeah. So it's pretty much the same kind of impact when we go to the airports and the experiences we have. But what we get in the UK is the level of inconsistency, both in the service we get, but also the quality of the service. So you can turn up at Heathrow and get a fantastic service, but you can go to other places and actually, like Birmingham, and people turn up and you've as you rightly said, the PRM forms that we fill up, they ask you the nth degree, like your inside leg measurements, your left-handed, all of these things, and you turn up and they go, so what do you need? What assistance? And you think, what the hell was that form for? So I think we just need to contextualize some of this stuff, because it isn't all in the past, really. And I think, how do we go forward and get this beyond getting the CAA to get some teeth?
I'm 100% with you. I mean, one of the biggest things I was sort of touching on, in this day and age, I think one of the greatest weaknesses within the aviation industry, full stop, believe it or not, is computerization and technology. You look at the sophistication we've all got on our iPhones and so forth. We're still working on what they call in the industry 4-letter CETA codes. Essentially, it's how they communicate with each other, and it is the most, it's a bit like a telex. It's the most basic amount of data. So you've given all this to the medical department, and actually, in reality, unfortunately, I'm afraid to say, the majority of people will simply see you as a WCHC or WCHS. And essentially, even that, in terms of to make it clear for those that are not familiar, WCHC to them means you need to be carried or lifted onto your seat. But if you're a paraplegic or a petite person or a big person like me, do I need 2 people, 3 people, 4 people? You've got no idea. So this is where I have a degree of sympathy for the poor little chap on minimum wage that's been assigned to me when he gets it. He doesn't even really, that's of course if he's been pre-notified, because it's another story, then he's got to sort of think on his feet quickly, oops, I've gone to meet you, I've got me and my colleague, oh dear, I'm going to need 3 or 4. The level of information that's being relayed is pitiful. And this is my biggest bugbear with the CAA at the moment. We are still dealing, and I know we've got international problems here and different countries all kind of being on the same page. It's not a 2-second job. But I've looked at a number of the apps that are out there. Neatbox is one that's being used now. I think Edinburgh have adopted it, Luton are looking at it. And it's something that you can have on your phone to notify the airport when you are going to arrive, where you are going to arrive, what assistance you're going to need from the car park, the bus station, with luggage, whatever. That's great. But that goes as far as that person that's going to check you in or assist you directly. The airlines aren't getting it. The people at the other end aren't getting it. So it's fragmented. And again, you're not getting this consistent level of service. But for me personally, it was something I was going to ask you all. There is a big sort of human rights issue here with the sort of the need to pre-notify. The law was written to say that you should, and it would be preferred if you told the airline, this is where it gets confusing, you need to tell the airline that you are with a disability and you will need assistance, and it is for them to relay that then directly to the airport and then the suppliers that they use to facilitate your passage through. So that could be these OmniServes and OCSs that provide the assistance directly, and then the ground agents, which might be a Swissport or a Menzies or something, who put your equipment on the aircraft. There's a lot of people in this chain, and if they're only just getting WCHC, it's not helping them much. But the dilemma is that with people who've received poor service historically, they say, well, I did tell you, it didn't make any difference. So they've stopped doing it. And most airports in the UK at the moment are still only working on somewhere in the region of 70 to 80% pre-notification. Well, that's greatly improved on what it was, believe me. A lot of Europe is still working on somewhere between 50 and 60. So if you can imagine any workforce, when they turn up for work that day, knowing about 75% of the people that will arrive, and what do they really know about them? They don't know how they're traveling to the airport, who will be with them. Do they need to assist them with luggage from their car? Do they need to assist them throughout the airport? Because some will go straight to the gate. So to me, technology is absolutely key to this, to assisting or providing the right assistance to you. But you're right, it's consistency. If you then get an aircraft that arrives earlier than was anticipated, and he's got, believe it or not, 50 or 60 wheelchair assistance requests, which some airlines will put through because they know Heathrow will take an age to walk through. There might be language barriers. So people know if I ask for assistance, actually, that negates any issues I'll have to sort of deal with as I sort of go through the airport. That came in early. All the staff that were waiting to meet your flight have had to go and get that one, and they've been delayed further because they were expecting 25 and they've now got 50. So it's taken them double the amount of time, and then they've arrived to you late. There's your inconsistency just by one means of airport adjustment that they weren't anticipating. It's very, very complex, but I feel that if we all did pre-notify as a matter of course, and at least the airport were anticipating 100% of their passengers, that's a starting point. Then we can get to the complexities of their exact needs when they're going to arrive. As I say, aircraft will always go off schedule, some late, some early, and you kind of almost have to address who's in first, because of course that's then blocking the space for the next one that's coming along. It's this constant, again, Heathrow's a brilliant example, landing every sort of 40 seconds or something. So it's very, very difficult, I can understand, but I don't think the system's helped by poor technology and the non-mandatory requirement for not having to tell people that you're coming, because I think it's impossible for them to work there, be efficient with their workload.
Thanks, Andy. Stephen, you wanted to ask a question as well.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions and a couple of thoughts. I'm slightly distracted. David Blaine is proving how stupid and how amazing humans are by going up in balloons. Just, yeah. Americans. I'm the chairman of planning on Truro City Council, and I share Dustin's annoyance with car parks and private things. There's no regulation on the width of a car park space, believe me. Wow. But isn't it really, as much as we can complain about the airports and everything like that, I still feel after 30 years of being in a wheelchair that 90% is on us. We know our care. We know what we want. We know what happens when things go wrong. What I appreciate from you, Andy, really is the unforeseen things that we haven't come across. But so much the planning, like for example, if I was going to trust my chair with somebody, with a team to put in a thing, I think I would laminate and glue to the back of the chair exactly how to take the brake off.
Yes,
Do not push with.
Definitely.
And this is something we encourage.
Don't rely on these people. And I go to a hospital, and in a hospital setting, they should know a C5 complete. In this day and age, probably 1 or 2 biscuits too many for me. We don't get lifted. They should know, but they don't.
Agreed.
And we're expecting hospitals, expecting airlines, and like you rightly say, minimum wage people, which it comes down to the wages. That's a whole different show. Expecting them to know, and they just, I just think we're 40 years away from that. as much as that's frustrating. So my questions through that frustration, I have a terrible memory, so I did write about it. What happens, right, we can do everything we possibly can not to have a AD attack in the air. So I'm in the air, I'm not in my own wheelchair, and I have an attack that I need to go toilet. I would hope, but in 12 hours, it's quite, there is a percentage possible. And the other question is, brilliant, we've sorted out in this country, my wheelchair's gone on the plane now, brilliant, I land in the other country, say America, and there's no wheelchair, or it's damaged, or broke, or there's nobody there to help. What happens then? So there are two questions.
So the first one, if you need to use the toilet in the air, is that the first question? Yeah.
Well, the first, I would, yeah, I don't know what a toilet's like in the planes, but probably similar to a train. I've got my carer and my partner probably would be with me. So I would probably fly with two people.
Right. So it is important.
Can I be cleaned up? Is it possible?
Oh, sorry, I see where you're going. No, regrettably, no. Right, we need to look at destinations here probably more. Within Europe, no. You talk about a train toilet. That's a luxury compared to a lot of the airline toilets in terms of size. Okay. So we are literally talking about, I mean, if I stood up and probably rotate inside them, they're like telephone boxes. So in terms of you using a toilet within Europe on most what I call bucket spade flights, no. In terms of some of the long haul carriers now, and Virgin is one of these, where they've created a number of different gadgets, but sort of partitions between two toilets so that the partition could be pulled back to enable you to have a much bigger space, you would, in that environment, be able to go in there, you know, with two persons. That I think would work. Whether you have the appropriate layout, without getting publicly too nitty gritty and basic here, in terms of providing a reasonable cleansing service, if you know what I'm trying to say, it's not ideal. No, far from it. I mean, that's a simple fact of life. It's not as it should.
That's what I thought.
It's not. Look, it's not a changing places toilet. That's probably the best way of trying to describe it.
And I wouldn't expect it on a plane.
No. So that's tight. It's very difficult because I hear of people that literally dehydrate themselves almost 2 days before they fly long haul, just so that they don't have problems with the loo and so forth. And you're, oh my God, the danger involved in that process. But nevertheless, there is airline policy. The European law does state that and here's the key thing, if you could stand unaided and then get your way shuffling almost, which for all of us here probably is just not appropriate, and get onto this aisle seat, the airlines must carry them during flight, and the air hostesses must provide that facility for you to wheel you to the toilet, but you're still at the other end. So again, for everybody I'm talking to here today, I'm pretty well this is just not appropriate.
Just not appropriate.
So regrettably, no. So one has to sort of have one's own mechanisms and means of coping with that, if you know what I mean.
So it would just be damage limitation until you landed and could be sorted.
Absolutely right. I'm getting lots of waving.
Sorry, can I just interject in that? So what I've found is that if I'm doing long haul, and I insist on my wheelchair being on board, and I put my wheels in the overhead on long haul and European, because they love to fiddle with things in the airports, and I've had problems where they've messed up my Tetra release situation, so they always go on the plane with me no matter what I'm traveling. But what I've found is that the toilets are really tight, but if somebody could do a standing transfer with you from the which is old-fashioned, I know, but you could possibly get on the toilet. But what I've found, and I insist on, is that I use business class toilets, and the reason I do that is because they can actually put a curtain across, so that where the space from the toilet door and the corridor bit they can actually cut that off. So that actually gives space for you to, in my case, for pulling up my trousers, because I can't, pants and things, because I can't do it in the little toilet. I have been on some flights, and actually British Airways do wheelchair toilets on long haul, and at a squeeze. I mean, they're not brilliant, but they are. You most probably could get two people into yourself and two people into that toilet at a, it would be very cozy, but you, and there's a sink and stuff like that, so if you needed cleaning up, you'd manage that. But I actually find that it, for me personally, it's easier if I'm on long haul to be business, to use business class, because I've got this extra space that they can curtain off, and it allows me, if I wanted to, to be in this space and totally undress and wash and whatever. So that's my personal experience. Can I just ask a question in terms of, because I don't know if many other people travel alone, but I travel alone, and one of the things that I've found, I always try to ask for an upgrade to business class, and it's not about having a better environment for me or better food. What's better is that you can actually get a better service from the crew, and have we looked at asking or putting pressure that if people with mobility difficulties or whatever are traveling alone, that they are automatically upgraded to business class? Because I was attacked by a passenger in economy, and I knew that this, I just sensed something was not great, and then there was this massive panic during the flight, because of course they then had to move me away from this person, and then they listened to what I said, where business class is the better place to be kept an eye on, because the economy crew don't provide a good service. They won't give you bottles of water, which you get in business class. When you're on your own, you've got nobody to go and get you a glass, a cup of water or whatever. And so I think certainly that should, could I urge you that we actually push for that? Many airlines will do it. British Airways aren't good at it.
Okay. Steve, apologies. I just realised I didn't answer your second question, which was to do with wheelchair damage or not even having your wheelchair when you arrived. I think that was what you were asking, wasn't you?
Yeah, it's just we can almost plan everything from this side when you're landing.
You've got, obviously, without getting too technical here, because of course, if you use the example for the States, you're then starting to deal with slightly different legislation to what we have in Europe and so forth. But nevertheless, it's still good. All airports in under the European regime are obligated to provide a replacement. We've got to be careful with our words again. A replacement chair if yours is damaged, not fit for purpose, or lost when you arrive. However, what does that chair look like? And this has been my biggest bugbear, because what they'll invariably do is let you have one of their standard, possibly not even self-propelling, even if you could or wanted to, self-propelling chairs. It would just be a simple little thing on 4 wheels type thing. So it's not really of any use whatsoever. I've been advocating, I'm not suggesting they go out there and all buy brand new, latest state-of-the-art power chairs, but have an arrangement with a local mobility provider, solution type company, that they could call in the event of, actually, this has been damaged and it could be repaired adequately till you get it to your proper provider. Alternatively, can I at least hire from you something that's similar in terms of, back size, right hand control, left hand control, whatever it may be. It's not by any means a replacement for, but it might allow you to have a degree of independence. Because again, I keep using this as an excuse, or they are using it as an excuse, is the legislation is not clear enough and not specific enough, and is not really followed through as hard as it should be. I have said to all airports I've been talking to, please, could you just forge a relationship? You don't have to, but it would be a good thing to do, because whether it be the airline's fault or it comes under your remit, somebody is not going to be happy if they've got nothing for them to be able to leave the airport today in, whilst hopefully they're able to either get yours flown to where it should be, i.e. you on holiday or you having returned, or get yours adequately repaired. So the answer to the question, you've got to look at your destinations here. That would definitely happen in Europe. That would definitely happen in the States, and America, and Australia is very good. My knowledge on the Far East, Middle East, it's a bit hit and miss. I travelled to see my son who was out in Koh Samui off Thailand a couple of years ago, which in my power chair I thought was a bit of a big ask. It was an immense ask, you know. I mean, they were just, with respect, were just not used to me, my size, the chair, etc. Had it been damaged, I don't even want to think, especially on the way out, what would have happened for my holiday. I would not have got a replacement anything like as good as that. If you're contemplating going to America, and again, it's depending where. Is it? Can I ask? Is it Florida you're thinking of, or what are you?
Well, it's more of a tour because I got to go over there speaking about my book and things like that.
Okay.
But mind you, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I'm thinking about I might take it as a cruise.
Okay, that could be. The other thing you do, which I was encouraged to do when I did the Thailand trip, which I'm glad I did now, I hired a chair which wasn't perfect. It was power chair, but it was better than mine. It was better than mine being damaged. And I was lucky it wasn't damaged, but you know, it wasn't as comfortable for me for the duration of the holiday. But I was covering myself just in case this thing was taken out of action. Cruise obviously is going to be a lot safer in terms of the damage. And I do need to stress, because Breda had asked me one question, you know, what is one of the common questions that's a concern for people traveling? Historically, it had always been the number one was wheelchair damage. That is, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I'm just saying it's far, far less than it was. Again, back to rules and regs, the total amount that an airport or airline was obligated to repay was dated. I mean, it was something the equivalent of about €1,000. So actually probably bore no resemblance whatsoever to some of the modern day costs of our chairs. So consequently, you kind of got the impression that they probably weren't enforcing the safe, careful management of them by the ground agent as much as they should. Since I've seen more and more airlines now paying the true represented cost of that chair, their insurance claims have obviously kind of hit the bottom line. And guess what? People are treating things a little bit better. It's not perfect, but it is a lot better.
And I guess it's the responsibility thing again. House insurance, insure your chair, make sure, you know, do what you can, take the bits of it that might get broken.
Spot on. I mean, I've seen people travel with things like sort of chin controls and so forth. And I'm saying, oh my God, no, you will not get another one of those. And you are literally, you're not going to move, you know, the other end. If you so try and think of, you know, an alternative if you can.
Steve,
Thank you, everyone.
Steve, quickly, just one thing. British Airways actually state, if at all possible, and that's depending on how many wheelchair users, if at all possible, they will try to put your wheelchair on board. So it's worth, again, checking with different airlines
It is,
as to whether...
Mine would be way too big, too heavy. Is yours
electric?
Yeah, it's electric.
Okay.
I really appreciate what you're saying, but too many biscuits means that's probably...
You know, I'm just saying that it's worth checking with airlines.
It's worth asking
whether they will put, you know, if you can fold the chair down, whether they will put electric wheelchairs are very different because of the batteries, but some will. Might not personal experience, but one of the worst airlines for damaging wheelchairs is Air France. So I avoid Air France like the plague, because I was a Paralympic athlete, and many of the French athletes would complain bitterly about how their chairs have been damaged. And so, you know, again, what would be useful is if we actually had something that talked about, you know, within the SIA, that talked about, you know, you know, is this airline better than that in terms of caring for wheelchairs, so that we again, it's about protecting your wheelchair. You know what I mean? So that's all that's all I want to say. Sorry, Breather.
No, that's fine. I'm just conscious of the time. We've gone half an hour over. So, Lady Marie, did you just put your hand up to say something in summary?
Yeah, I just want to say something quickly because I know we've gone over by half an hour. I sit on the Accessibility Transport Forum at Heathrow, so I know all about the access and assistance and traveling from the train from Paddington Station straight to Heathrow, getting access and so on. One of the main issues that we have also is that while you may be able to get the assistance when you get to the airport, what we're finding that more airlines now are changing their policies on the type of chairs that you can travel with. One of our members contacted us. She was traveling to her country. I can't remember if it was Turkey or somewhere like that. Traveling from Heathrow with her own power chair was fine. Having to change in another country to another airline, which you find that the airplane was much smaller. She was not allowed to carry that chair that she used at Heathrow onto the plane the other side. So you have a lot of complications when you're traveling with your power chair, for example. Some airlines would say, well, you're not able to take certain size. Have you found that, Andy?
I have. Now, the only legal reason which is more to do with sort of health and safety or just a practicality scenario, is aircraft type. So if you look at somebody, say within Europe, EasyJet fly the Airbuses. The key thing with them, they got big holes, they got big doors, big hole doors. So my chair will go into that. You tilt it slightly, but not too much. If you look at, say, a Ryanair again, and unfortunately Jet 2, they use the Boeing 737, which has got a very, very small door, and then the space that they use or they place the chair within is even more limited because it kind of, there's a bit of a bulkheady thing that sticks out. So you do have restrictions in place, for example, by Jet 2, where you've got to have the whole folded chair under something like 82 centimeters, which is virtually impossible to achieve unless you completely strip it down, and then you've got to rebuild the thing at the other end. Now, the Civil Aviation Authority well, they can't do a lot about it. They accept that as an excuse. But if they are flying an aircraft that's sufficiently big to be able to take the chair without having to rip it to pieces, there is no legal reason for them to be allowed to do that. But you're right, if you're changing places like Turkey, and it depends what airline they're then transferring on to. The problem I've got, my chair's 165 kilos. And one of the biggest issues I find, they say, oh, we haven't got the belt lifter. We haven't got the mechanism by which we would actually take it and put it straight into the hole. I'm saying, quite honestly, I don't care. 4 of you are going to have to lift it up then. Essentially, that's not my problem. I've seen them do it. It's not been pretty, but it's not a legal reason. But if the aircraft type they're flying, and when Flybe were operating, for example, as lovely as they were, they had tiny little prop planes. You couldn't get a number of our chairs in them. So nobody's going to have a go at them for that. They're just accepting that's just logistics.
So the problem is then we have, if say, for example, like myself, I've got a very large power chair. So therefore, and it's the only one I've got. If I'm going to travel, I want to travel with it. I should be able to purchase another chair just so I can travel.
Totally agree. But this, I mean, now we're talking about a much, much bigger worldwide issue. And then we've really got to sit in front of the people like Boeing and Airbus and so forth in terms of, aircraft design. You're probably aware of Chris Iseno, who's obviously advocated now for bringing wheelchairs, rolling chairs straight onto aircraft. In principle, great idea, but it's an uphill struggle, just again in terms of manufacturers, in terms of logistics, unbolting seats to make the space for these to be able to tie it down, and then all the various rules and regs that follow with that. So the answer to your question is it legally permissible for them to say what they have said to you or your colleague because of the size of you? Yes, it is, if they can demonstrate their aircraft isn't big enough to take your chair.
Thank you, Andy. Thanks, Lady Marie. Fab. So whilst I do a little wrap up, I was just thinking, Andy, do you want to put your email address into the chat box, and then anyone who maybe wants to carry on discussing with you afterwards or have any questions. If you
Look, you're looking at a complete IT novice here. I will do it and I will find it somewhere. You tell me where I'm heading. Chat. Oh, it's chat. Oh, it's not that difficult.
So you can just type your email address in there. And I've completely done this backwards. So at the start of this cafe, I should have asked, because we record cafes, is everybody happy who's on the cafe for us to share it on our social media channels? I do have people who are no longer on the cafe. I've got their email addresses so I can ask them. But by no means is anyone obliged. But Dustin and Stephen, particularly because everyone else has been on before, if you're happy for us to share this conversation on social media, that'd be fab. As I say, sorry, I should have said that at the very beginning. Working a little bit backwards. And so to wrap it up, because I think we could probably sit here for another hour and talk about this. It's such a hot topic. So let me just
Andy at accessibletravel.co.uk.
So I can't see it in there. Have you typed it in, Andy?
No, apologise, gang. I'm
do you want me to do it for you?
No, well, if you could, I was going to say I'm using Dragon software, so I was trying to talk to my machine, but it didn't hear it.
Okay.
Please do. It's Andy at Accessible Travel, ACCESS.co.uk.
Yeah, so yeah, I've just popped that in there. So if people want to have time to make a note of that. But as you say, I mean, it'd be great for people to feedback or ask you other questions, especially, to filter that feedback into the committees that you're on, depending on which airports. As you say, Dustin, you've had a lot of issues with Gatwick Airport. Unbelievable the limited number of spaces they've got available there. But thank you, Andy, though. It's been great to have this conversation and to have everybody to feed into it and give their input and their different experiences. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks everyone for sharing and putting questions forward as well. It's been really, really good. I think probably this would be a good conversation to come back to, actually, on another cafe when travel starts to resume more, and just to see what impact coronavirus has had for passengers with different disabilities, to see if hopefully it won't be detrimental, but who knows, there might be opportunities to come from it.
No, Bree, from my point of view, and I don't know about the resources at SIA in terms of capturing information. Obviously, if anybody wants to send anything to me directly, they're more than welcome. But equally, if there was a consensus of opinion coming from your service users about, this always happens, like the Gatwick thing. I don't have great deal of workings with on a regular basis with Gatwick, so Dustin's stuff told me was news to me. But if there's something that's coming through from a particular airport, I'm more than happy then to bring it to the forum.
Yeah,
discussion
definitely.
point, and if we kind of get, because we do need to, without question, collectively help shape future policy. I think we've got an opportunity now with the setup with Europe and the Civil Aviation Authority. Whereas they were constrained a little bit by this EU 1107, as it's called, we don't have to now. Yeah. I'm hoping we'll go better rather than worse. So if there's something that keeps coming up and it's a continuous problem for the collective, then yeah, let's use that as an opportunity to bring it to their awareness.
Yeah.
Reader, could you write in the chat or something on this in terms of I was talking about medical bags.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's and just that people have to get because that's actually makes a huge difference to traveling. And I got from looking at faces that it seemed as though quite a few people didn't know about the medical bag situation.
No, that was valuable to me. I've made a note.
So I'm just saying, remember that you are entitled, was it 25 kilograms?
No, I mean, basically, actually, it's up to 30 kilo, because the whole medical bag thing allows people who have to take oxygen cylinders and stuff like that. But, with us, we can take, our medical stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's up to 25 to 30 kilo is actually what a medical bag will allow.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I've just added that in
And
there.
Brady, you could add to that because it's all part of the same conversation. They're also allowed to take 2 pieces of medical equipment. So if there's somebody who did feel brave enough to take their hoist abroad, for example, or their power chair they're traveling in, as well as a manual chair, they're also allowed to do that in addition to that medical allowance. So it's for those that sort of say, oh, I can never hire a hoist when I go overseas. Some might want to take their own.
Yeah, no, that's really valuable information. Thank you.
And the other thing is it's a way of bending the rules slightly, but I've travelled with a throwing chair, and I've actually told them that it's my shower chair. So you can actually take.
Do you think we'd all get away with that one though? I'm not sure. I'm going to look at me.
But there are ways. But so, for example, if you can, because they will charge you for. In the past, you used to be able to take a sporting piece of equipment, wheelchair or whatever, with you. Now you get charged for that, and so it's a way round. And I'm just, again, it's if people were going on to doing a sporting thing, that because they can't question what you are saying, basically.
No, well, all that information has gone into the chat.
For the first time being here, I'm leaving with some valuable information. And I love Andy's optimism in disabled travel. It's so easy to be pessimistic.
Hello, Fluff.
Nowadays.
Well,
Thank you.
Glad you joined us, Stephen, and found it valuable. Come back next week. I don't know what the theme is yet.
I plan on it. Subject to council meetings, I will be here.
Andy, sorry, Andy, can I just say, if you are interested in the information regarding Gatwick or any of the other car park and at the airports, I can always email you over the.
I'd love you to. Seriously, Gatwick is Anne Bates' domain, but I would, and Heathrow is now more sort of Helen Dolphin, and she co-chairs it with
Graham Race. Graham Race is the Accessible Transport.
Gotcha. Yeah, there you go. So that, but no, many of the regionals and so forth, you'll be delighted because the more information I've got from people like yourselves, it'll just add fuel to the fire, which is great.
All right, I'll get something over to you in the next few days.
Super, thank you.
No problem.
Fab. Sorry, Leighton, we're not going to have time for a quiz today.
No.
We always finish with a quiz, Stephen and Dustin, but because we've gone on, we won't be able to. So you have to come back next week, and hopefully we'll have time for that.
No problem. Thank you.
That was your teaser, was it, to get me back?
It's well worth coming back for. But thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. It's been really, really good conversation. As I said, we'll share this on our social media channels, because I think other people, especially if other disabled passengers who've never travelled before, they can definitely learn something and take away information from today's conversation. So thank you, everyone, for participating, and Andy for joining us. And same time next week. So I hope to see you all there.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.